Hold on, you're live.
Live. Hi, everybody. I am here as the host for the Reading from the Room, and my name is Marjorie Gans, and I am on the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. And I am delighted that you could join us this evening for the October reading in our virtual series, which began in March and will go through the end of this year and into next year. These are the readings from the room. So for anyone new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, both established and emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day and provides desks and silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. Quiet companionship. We launched this new reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic when the room was closed and share wonderful writing, some by writers who call or have called the Writers' Room home, and some from around the country. Sorry about that. A benefit that's conferred on us by Crowdcast. Tonight we have Laura Vandenberg, a fiction writer of both short stories and novels, and Max Gladstone, a science fiction and fantasy novelist, screenwriter, and games designer. Laura and Max will read from their work, and then we'll open it to a larger discussion with time for questions and answers at the end, and you can put your questions in the little chat box at the bottom. So as we go along, feel free to use the feature, and I will read your questions. This series is made possible by grants from Mass Cultural Council and Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. If you enjoy this program, please consider making a contribution using the donate button at the bottom of your screen. Also, we will be recording this reading, and a replay will be available later on the website. We begin the evening with Laura Vandenberg. Laura was born and raised in Florida. She is the author of 5 works of fiction, including The Third Hotel, which was a finalist for the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award, and I Hold a Wolf by the Ears, which was one of Time Magazine's 10 best fiction books of 2020. In 2021, Laura was awarded both the Strauss Living Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters and a Guggenheim Fellowship in Fiction. She has a website, lauravandenberg.com. Laura, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Marjorie, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here this evening. And I'm going to read the opening sections of a short story called Your Second Wife, story structured in short titled sections. And I'm going to start at the beginning. So I don't think there's anything else you need to know. Here is a little bit of Your Second Wife. Gig economy. The photograph arrives in a padded manila envelope pressed between 2 sheets of cardboard. The picture is a headshot with a blue nothing background of a corporate portrait. The dead wife wears a starched white blouse and a black jacket, gray irises like slivers of ice, a modest, toothless smile, tasteful gold studs in her earlobes. Her name was Beth Butler, and she was killed in a hiking accident 5 weeks ago. As a grief freelancer, this is not the first time I've received such a photo, nor is it the first time the photo has been nailed with such care. The husbands, I have yet to be hired by a wife, contact me at a designated email. I send them an online questionnaire and request a photograph be mailed to a P.O. box because I like to be able to hold the wives in my hands. And as my sister has pointed out many times before, I can't be giving these grieving husbands my home address. Next, I require 3 videos of the wives in their natural environments, delivering a work presentation or jogging along a river or carrying a birthday cake into a crowded singing room. Then I need a week to prepare, and then we meet. Between impersonating dead wives, I work as a part-time dog walker and a part-time landscaper and a part-time food delivery courier. What an unbelievably exhausting moment to be alive in this era of the gig economy. The overcoat. I never meant to get into this line of work, though I cannot deny that I've always enjoyed being other people. In college, I interviewed to be a wealthy woman's personal assistant. Over lunch, she asked me if I knew the difference between tortuous and torturous, between adverse and averse. Once it was apparent that I did not, she told me that the ability to make these fine distinctions was a critical skill in a personal assistant, and that I should not bother ordering dessert. It was late fall, and the wealthy woman arrived wearing a magnificent fur coat, quarter length and dyed lavender. When the woman went to the bathroom, she left her coat slung over the back of her chair, and I walked out with it. I wore the lavender fur all through the winter and was transformed from a student who slept in the backs of lecture halls to one who made the dean's list. Every time I took a test, I imagined being a young woman of great means, of waking each morning to find my future rolled out before me, free of obstacle and horizon. Old pal. I discovered my gift for impersonating dead wives quite by accident. It was the year after college, and I dreamed of attending architecture school because I wanted to build skyscrapers. Then my best friend's wife died of a brain aneurysm, and he did not leave his bed for a month. I was working part-time for a theater makeup artist, and I brought in a photo of my best friend's dead wife and asked for her help. 3 hours later, I turned up at his door in a frosted blonde wig and tinted contacts and a prosthetic chin. I had even broken into his garage and gotten some of her clothes out of storage. A linen dress, strappy sandals, a black crossbody purse. "Let's get going," I said when he answered the door. His clothes were rumpled, his breath rank. He was barefoot and his toenails had grown into small talons. "Or we'll miss the movie." We strolled arm in arm to the theater, as I knew he and his wife used to do every Sunday. After the matinee, we had a drink on the patio of a nearby restaurant, as was their custom, and I ordered her drink, an Old Pal, even though I can't stand rye whiskey and so consider this flourish to be nothing less than an act of love. "Forget about skyscrapers," my best friend said as I walked him home. "This right here is your calling." Later, he told his grieving colleague about what I had done, and then that colleague told a neighbor, and then I had word of mouth, and then I had cards for a business called Your Second Wife. More photographs of dead wives came in the mail, and suddenly I had 4 part-time jobs instead of 3, and was too busy to apply to architecture school. On the city streets, I would gaze up at skyscrapers and wonder what had ever happened to the person who had wanted to build such great and terrible things. Marco Polo. Your Second Wife is 2 years old, and my sister still thinks I'm a part-time prostitute. She lives in Australia, and we communicate primarily through an app called Marco Polo. Most mornings I wake to find a new video, usually filmed in her kitchen or in her bathroom, as she holds her toothbrush up like a saber. "I hope you're being careful," she tells me. "I hope you're using protection." Again and again, I tell her no sex of any kind is the first item on my contract, and I only meet grieving husbands in public spaces. I once had to turn down a job because the husband told me his dead wife was agoraphobic and never left the house. I had binge watched all the seasons of Law & Order SVU, so I know what's out there. I'll give my sister this much, though. While I am not exchanging sex for money, my most lucrative asset has still turned out to be my body. After Your Second Wife hit the 6-month mark, I felt awash in cash and treated myself to overdue dental work. Australia. Not long before I started Your Second Wife, I visited my sister and her husband in Australia and had jet lag for 27 days. One evening, I was sitting at their kitchen table reading Positive, a book I had been directed to study if I wanted to continue my part-time job as a dog walker, while my sister and her husband cooked dinner. I kept getting distracted and looking out the window to see if anything was happening in the alleyway below. I smelled chicken fat and balsamic. The clock ticked on the wall. The minute hand was 5 past the hour when I briefly became invisible. The window no longer held my reflection. I could not make out a body filling the chair. I picked up positive. In the glass pane, the book levitated. I watched my sister and her husband stuff butter pats and rosemary twigs under the chicken skin, oblivious to the metaphysical marvel occurring in their home. I wondered if my condition was permanent, and if so, if it could somehow become profitable. I was almost disappointed when the spell passed in less than a minute, like a fleeting headache. My reflection, a pale flame in the window once more. My sister will tell you that this episode was merely a jet lag-induced hallucination, but I believe it was a premonition, a sign. The Claremont Killer. On this morning's video, my sister says that the police have finally apprehended the Claremont Killer who stalked the streets of Perth in the 90s. The police have released footage that shows one of the victims outside a hotel waiting for a taxi. She nods at a man lurking on the edge of the frame. The camera changes its view, and when it switches back to the hotel entrance, the young woman is gone. My sister says that if you freeze the video, you can see the profile of the killer's face, sharp and bright, like the fin of a shark hunting a night ocean. Until his arrest, he was the president of the Perth Junior Athletics Club. Today is the day I am scheduled to meet Beth Butler's husband, and I know this is my sister's way of telling me to be careful. Worlds of Mystery. When she was alive, Beth Butler loved visiting the planetarium. I meet her husband at the entrance, holding 2 tickets. "You're late," I say, because Beth Butler arrived early for everything and was thus always chiding people for running behind. I take his hand, and together we sail through the planetarium's dark rooms. We sit in a theater and watch a video called Moons, Worlds of Mystery. The moons that orbit across the screen look like giant marbles. When one of the moons explodes, a child somewhere behind us cries out. I learned that exomoons are natural satellites orbiting giant alien planets, which I will admit I did not know before today. I can't claim that the gig economy doesn't ever teach me anything. In the parking lot, I'm supposed to say, I'm going to swing by the market and pick up clams for dinner. Beth Butler's signature dish was linguine with clams, and then head to the tea, where the train cars would be crowded at this time of day, but the husband breaks the script by asking if I need a ride home. The clouds move swiftly above our heads. My glitter stockings itch. I say the line about the clams and then spin around. My heels are clicking fast across the asphalt when a shadow looms behind me and a lunging hand presses a white cloth to my mouth. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was wonderful. I have a number of questions about that, which I will hold, because what's important is our next reader, who is Max Gladstone. And Max, so Max has been an award-winning author. He's won the Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Award. He also has been thrown from a horse in Mongolia and once wrecked a bicycle in Angkor Wat. He's the author of many books, including The Empress of Forever, the graph sequence of fantasy novels, and with Amal El-Motar, the internationally best-selling This Is How You Lose the Time War. His dreams are much nicer than you'd expect, and his website is www.maxgladstone.com. And also, Max started working in the room at the beginning of 2020, trying to draft his next novel. So he is a room person. And Max, we welcome you. Please read.
Thank you so much, Marjorie, and thanks to everyone for being here. Delighted to not see you this evening, if that makes any particular sense. I really want to know the end of Laura's story now, though, so I guess I'll have to find it. I'm going to read from the opening of my new novel, Last Exit, which is coming out this February from Tor Books. And I actually did write some of this novel, though not this particular section, while I was at the room, and I revised it while I was at the room before the great lockdown happened. So this is from the first chapter. The 10th year after she lost Sal, Zelda was living in the back seat of a hard-used Subaru in a small town in Middle Tennessee, waiting for the end of the world. It might happen any day. She worked as a checkout clerk at the local Walmart and slept in the parking lot with the other losers and retired mobile home people. And every day she felt the rot gather, the wet, foul heat of it, the summer heavy as a guillotine in this time of change. She had followed the rot here across 3 states, guided by the hackles on the back of her neck, by yarrow stalks in the faces of upturned tarot cards. This was the place. There was a mystery here, and she would solve it, or she would die, which would solve one mystery at least. A boy, 18, 19, in a black t-shirt with a homemade tattoo of Thor's hammer on his wrist, always staring at his phone, wandered up and down the fishing aisle. She'd pass him sometimes as she restocked. While she was around, he never, ever looked at the guns one aisle over. Sometimes he'd glance at her, though, never quite brave enough to match her eyes. It might be him. Or Mona, her sometimes partner in the checkout line, her eyes deep set and red, her shoulders down, her face bruised sometimes, or her wrist. She offered Zelda weed, and they smoked out on someone's back 40 under the stars. And Zelda coughed because it had been a while since she last smoked, and when she remembered just how long and whom she'd been with, she began to weep and passed it off as more coughing. Mona wasn't from around here either, she said, by which she meant she was from East Tennessee, Smoky Mountain country, not used to flatland or the local flavor of dirty strip mall. When she worked her lighter, the spark caught reflections of something jagged in the depths of her eyes. Mona's husband drank and stayed up late into the night, typing on the internet and watching videos about how she was the root of his problems. He'd been a good man, she said, when they met, and he still was, just confused. Zelda said she didn't care what was in people's hearts. You only had to watch their hands. Mona said that she had a secret place, a clearing in the woods out back of their small house where she'd go when it got too much. She'd pretend that no one could find her there, and she'd lean against the rough bark of one tree and talk into a cleft, tell the dark space her fears, and sometimes, she said, she thought it whispered back. It might be her. You had to be lost to let the darkness in. You had to lie awake turning and churning around a coal in your stomach, body aching and mind alert to the whispers behind the door. You had to need something you couldn't imagine, needed more than life or sanity. You had to pray not to some airy aftermath god of smoke and cloud and resurrection, but to a grotesque wriggling belly-deep god of now. No one comfortable could muster that razor need, but you never knew who was hungry or sick, or curled around a fish hook of what he thought, or the TV said the world denied him or gave to someone less deserving. Everyone else was less deserving. So where would the end begin? Where would the rot break through, and who would call it? She never knew. She envied movie detectives the clarity of their cases. In real life, you never know what your problem is unless someone loves you enough to tell you. Philip Marlowe just had to drink and wait and not even hope. Sooner or later, a beautiful blonde with legs long and bright and curved as the swell of swift water over rocks would stride through his door of all the doors in the world with a mission. Zelda would never be half so lucky with the mission or the blonde, and she was running out of time. Every morning she crossed off another day on the calendar hanging in the Subaru, one day closer to Sal's birthday, one day closer to her date with that olive door. 1 week left, and the drive would eat most of that if she wanted to do it safely. She could give up. She didn't have to sneak a third of the way across America and through the black hole orbit of Manhattan to stand on Sal's mother's doorstep and knock and fail for another year. This was her life now, had been for the better part of a decade, wandering alone, haunting back lots, shoring up the sand castles of the country as they crumbled. Better give up what was gone, take the L. She considered it, drunk, for the better part of an hour. Then she went hunting. It was harder to do things this way than to wait for the rot to manifest. First, she had to build spin. She circled the small town in her Subaru to the extent there was a town to circle. There was a town square, at least, a city hall in red brick, and a movie theater built in 1950, where she'd spent some of her spare cash to watch a forgettable action picture starring a guy named Chris. The other buildings on the square were shuttered and empty except for the attorney's office, and there the curtains were drawn. Vacant storefronts sported peeling decals, Kohl's Hardware, a liquor store, a pharmacy with a punning name, all gone now. The buildings in the town square had been built to last 300 years. They would stand while the stick-and-board houses she drove past rotted to dust. But they would stand 3 centuries empty. Why build anything to last when the whole country lived on borrowed time? She drove circles around the city hall, drinking the strangeness of the shuttered place. The sun glanced off windows as haunted as Mona's eyes. Turn and watch it. Feel it. Suck the spin of the wheel and the suchness of the passing world down into the pit in your heart, where it gathers like cotton candy around a carney's wand. She listened to the wheels of the Subaru on the seams of the road, and when the spin churned inside her, she popped the glove compartment without taking her eyes off the road, withdrew a handful of Yarrow stalks, and tossed them into the empty passenger's seat. The Yarrow stalks told her that she'd almost missed the turn. She heeled the car hard right, felt it tip, and slid through a narrow gap in the wide-open gulf of the 2-lane road onto the right track. Hunting. She had worked out how to do all this way back in college, had perfected it on the road with the others and with Sal. Driving by Yarrow stalks and by the transformations in her head, Zelda remembered other cars and other worlds, lifetimes ago. Ramon's black Challenger with the red racing stripe, Sal in the passenger seat, the two of them blissed out and talking math as they slipped from streetlight to streetlight, and all the darkness of the world rolled over Sal Tempest's skin. They had dared each other out into the deep like girls at summer camp, not realizing just how far either of them would go to please the other, until the lake's depths yawned bottomless beneath, and they'd both lost the strength to swim for shore. Just a little further. And I think I'll stop there. Hello.
I seem to have lost myself.
I see you.
Yeah, we
I
can
also
hear you
see-
and see
You
you.
do?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can't see myself, but if that doesn't matter, does it?
I also see that I disappeared
as
for a
long as you
second
can
there.
see.
Apologies, everyone.
Okay. Well, I saw you the whole time.
Okay.
Anyway, welcome to the world of the internet. So Max, thank you. I found that interestingly moving. And there are 2 questions. Unfortunately, I can't get to them. Mark, can you get to the questions?
Yeah, I can access them if that's helpful.
I can also get to them.
Yeah, there's
So-
one for you, Laura.
So,
Okay.
so
Okay, 'cause I can't seem to get back here.
no problem.
Yeah, I see 2 here.
So one question is for Laura, and that is, in what way does it seems to me that your story explores identity and what makes up an identity. Was that your intention, and how did you sort of come about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely something that I was interested in with that story. I mean, I was thinking a lot about, first of all, that identity, of course, is not necessarily like a fixed thing, and it can shape shift depending on context. And so, I think, given some of my headphones, given that this is a character who spends a lot of her time, like literally in disguise, I'm interested in what sort of behaviors kind of become permissible or available when people are masked in one way or another, and the way that can reconfigure how one regards their own sense of identity. But also, I think the nature of the gig economy, which like we're all, or most of us at least are interacting with in different ways. I mean, there can be like a really strange blend of sort of intimacy and anonymity. I've written at this point, and like as someone who used to use ride shares a fair amount in far more strangers' cars than I could have, anticipated, especially being like a 80s baby who grew up with the like that was like the one thing that my parents really managed to impress upon me, which is you should never get in a car with a stranger. Yeah, and in some cases, like
and my father was always never tell a stranger on the internet where you are or anything about you.
Right,
and now the joke, right? You push the button on the internet to send a stranger's car to your house.
Yeah, of course. So I was interested in kind of exploring that intimacy and anonymity to an even greater degree, and the various kinds of conflicts and confusions such relationships can cause.
Got it. Max, I don't know, Marjorie, can you see the pictures of the questions now, or shall I?
I'm back.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I don't know where I was, but here I am. Max, here's your question. As a writer of science fiction and fantasy, how many touch points with our common reality do you put in? And is this important to you?
That's a really good question. 63. Any more and it's too much, and any fewer and you lose people. So no matter where you go, there you are. Thank you, Hiram. I end up writing stories that feel to me emotionally like they hew close to reality. I think that science fiction and fantasy are two genres where it is important to be a certain kind of realist. You're entering a dream space in which you can't rely on people's customary knowledge of what brands that they'll find if they walk into the store, or the existence of something like a store. Maybe you're on Alpha Centauri, maybe there are three suns. So you really have to ask yourself, what is true about these people? What is sort of true about these people and their relationships with one another? What is emotionally true about the scene? Even if what a person has lost is a connection with their home spaceship that raised them, you can sort of start to see anchors, right? They're a clone. You have a person who's a clone with 1,000 other clones, and they've all been raised on a ship that's going to another galaxy, and they're left on an asteroid because the ship has experienced the ship mind has experienced some catastrophic fault or been hit by a solar flare or something. And so you have loss, you have abandoning the crash, you have suddenly being on your own in a vast and hostile environment. You have, who are these strangers who came up, who are raised with you? And there are a lot of doors in there if you want to talk about siblinghood, if you want to talk about relationships with parents, if you want to talk about the vast, gulf of that reality can sometimes seem to be. So you're writing a dream, and you're following the dream back to emotional truths often. And another thing that is, and I'm sort of stealing a friend Arcady Martin's analysis of science fiction and fantasy as genres, that they're genres of sort of exploration, and people come to not only wonder at the strange, but to see how it fits together. It's not merely a wash of sensory experience. So I think the reader is interested in standing at some remove to the world and piecing it back together, if that makes any sense. I think that's also in this extremely strange world that we find ourselves in, a place that we're often in, that I often feel like I'm in anyway. Maybe all the rest of you feel like you've got it completely and 100% figured out. But from where I'm sitting, I often find myself in the position of, I don't know, somebody wandering around Rama in an Arthur C. Clarke story asking, where did all of this come from? How are we here? What's going on? What is our place in all of this? I think that's a very relatable and human experience.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree. And that was as good an exploration of why people are interested in science fiction as I've ever heard. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you.
Sure. I think there's one more question, and I will, in Marjorie's absence, I will ask it. So let's see. For Max, it says, I love your characterization across all your books. Can you say anything about characters in The Last Exit? Any inspiration, any details you love, someone you loved writing?
Oh, man. I love the characters in this book so much that it hurts, honestly. These are people who are it's a world that's a little closer to our world than any I've ever written before. People who've worked with, read my books, read the craft sequence, know that it's this sort of post-industrial secondary world fantasy. So like there are correspondences with our modern existence, but there aren't specific names. And Empress of Forever starts in a world that's a little bit close to the future of our own, but then rapidly goes into very strange territory. And Last Exit is set roughly in 2019, and it's about people who went to college, about when I went to college. So even though none of these people are folks that I knew in any direct and exact way, it was breathtaking and kind of strange for me, who doesn't usually write this way, to be running into people on the page that I met, or knowing that a character absolutely was in the same room that I was in when a particular song was sung or a particular dance was thrown. You get this sudden sense that your characters are haunting you. And I honestly don't want to go into too great details, but it's a book that's a lot about the friends that you make in college who you think are going to be your people for your entire life. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes they drift apart, and sometimes that can be thorns in all of you, and you're all trying to find a way in a really big and terrible and wonderful world. And the question of what do you give up, and what hope can you find in it?
Great.
Also, there are monsters.
Well, well, listen, I want to thank all of you for attending. And I also want to thank our readers, Max and Laura. Despite the technical glitches and the issues, we persisted. This is our next readings from the room is November 10th, and we will get you information all about that. I wish you all a fabulous evening and the rest of the week. And thanks, Laura, Max. It was great. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for hosting.
You bet. Bye-bye.